Vanessa. Welcome, Vanessa. Thank you for coming along today. You sharing some development of a wait a minute, what's the right word? Redeployment framework to allow volunteers to decide whether they're ready to return. It was developed by Caroline Chestnutt of Courtauld Institute, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And if some of you who were on the call previously may have remembered that Caroline actually mentioned about the CIPD framework, if I can share my screen with you, then I'll just show you. Hang on, bear with me 1 second. And there we go. Just to remind everybody, this was the, can you see all that? Yeah. Well, give me the thumbs up. Yeah. Okay, cool. This is what the framework that Caroline was referring to. It's from the Chartered Institute of Professional Development, and it was very much about a return to the workplace from CIPD, and it was planning. And Caroline mentioned it in a previous call, HVG Coffee Afternoon, and Matt, kindly, as he normally does, challenged us, some of us in the group, to create one for volunteers. And me being me, took the responsibility for putting my hand up and saying, yep, I would be happy to do that, but I roped Caroline in as well. And pleased to say that thanks to Caroline, she's created a flowchart for volunteers, all of her own work, and I want her to have full credit for this because it is good. But she is on holiday, otherwise she'd be with us today and she'd be sharing it herself. But she has actually given us, because of the fact that this afternoon is very much about redeployment and getting back into our museums, an opportunity for me to share it with all of you as well. So if you look at this CIPD flowchart, you'll see that it's very much about covering furlough. It's aimed at staff. It's the role of the staff itself, along with risk assessments on the role, returning to the workplace guide, as well as symptoms, or if you're clinically vulnerable. So very employee related. So what we wanted to do is come up with something that would actually be more focused around volunteers, and this is what Caroline's actually come up with, and so you can have a look at it. It's a bit more oh, sorry, haven't lost that hopefully. I've lost it from my screen. I'm hoping you're still seeing it. Hang on 1 second.
We're not at the moment. It might just need to go. There we go.
There we go. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, cool. Okay, so you can see it's a little bit more friendly. Obviously, if you look at this is only a guide. This is not saying this is what we should suggest as a Heritage Volunteering Group that you should be using. But obviously, we're very aware that a number of you are out there are thinking about bringing back volunteers if you haven't done already, and that there are areas obviously that we need to think about in regards to the volunteers as well, and what can we do to try and help them to think about whether they feel comfortable about coming back. So this is what is taking the framework from that CIPD flowchart and applying it for volunteers, and that and if you actually look at it, you'll see that it's assuming there are certain things that you would have to have accompanying this flowchart, as in any of your return to work guidance, and it's assuming that you've also done any risk assessments around the roles of your volunteers as well. But it actually then talks the volunteer through, so they then actually have that decision of being happy about coming back. So checking to see, do they feel ready to return? Are they self-isolating? There's links in here. Those links would be to the government website, just to remind volunteers about what the symptoms would be, what being clinically vulnerable could be, because it's helping them to also understand that if you're actually looking after someone who potentially falls into that clinically vulnerable, then obviously that could affect you as well. And having the guidance with it as well, and obviously anything about risk assessment that you might want to provide as an additional documentation to accompany this, you can then make sure that the volunteer feels that they feel that you as an organisation have done enough to make them feel secure, and then hopefully that they're ready to come back. But if at any point they don't feel comfortable, then as you can see up in the top left hand corner, it says take your time. There's no pressure from us to return. Continue to volunteer from home, get in touch or book a shift when you feel ready. You may, obviously the wording around that might need to change, because you may not have that facility for volunteers to do work from home, to volunteer from home. But obviously the idea is to make it as flexible but as friendly as possible, but giving the volunteer the confidence that they can make the decision about whether they come back now or whether they come back later. All right, so we can share these with you afterwards. I don't know if anybody's got any questions, but that's it from me really, just about those two flow charts. But like I said, you can go find them. I think we provided the links before. We can give you the links again for the CIPD one. And obviously what we can do is we can share a link so that you can actually get this one and then maybe customize it or use it for your own use.
Thank you, Vanessa. Is a great flow chart, and I think it really helps emphasise the ability for volunteers to understand where they are, and helps clarify the stages they're at in returning to volunteering. How important do you think it is for volunteers to go through this process themselves, rather than being all one directional towards volunteers?
Personally, I'm just coming off a furlough now, and having had a couple of conversations with some of the volunteers, I think volunteers want to feel that they're part of the process and that they've actually got a say in whether they come forward or not. I think some organisations have probably already involved some of their volunteers, which in actually how that process is going to work, which I think is great. But I think if you're coming back in, or your organisation's already gone down a route already, I don't think there's a harm in actually having this and giving those volunteers that opportunity to say, just like we should have staff, that we should have the opportunity to have volunteers be able to say yes or no. So I think it's really important, and I think the way that this flow chart works, it does actually give them that flexibility to be able to do that. So I think it is quite important. But obviously everybody's going to be different, every organisation is going to be different, everybody's going to have to look at things differently, but I think obviously just asking your volunteers is probably very important in this process.
Definitely, I completely agree. I think it adds an extra insight, and it allows volunteers to feel comfortable in talking about these sort of difficult circumstances. It might help breach a conversation, plus also it might help breach more conversations around what PPE they expect on returning. For example, I know at Caroline Museum, our volunteers have been very productive in terms of sending me updates about what sort of measures they've been seeing in the local area and what would make them feel comfortable. So I think this is an excellent tool as part of that. I've got a question from Matt asking whether it can go in, whether it be able to be shared into the next issue of Staying Connected.
Yep, no problem.
Brilliant.
I'll send it across, no props.
Thank you. Please do send thanks to Caroline for putting this together. I think it's going to be very useful, especially based on the amount of thanks we're getting through in the chat as well. It looks like it's going to be a very useful document for
I felt like I should have had her sign it like a piece of art itself, because she's from the Courtauld Institute of Art. We should have actually got her to sign it down in the right hand corner, shouldn't we? Caroline Chestnutt as well.